word if you say anything that's out of time and place, that's called profane. If you say something that's like a four-letter word, that's cussing. If you say something that's intended to injure someone, that's cursing. And then if you say something that's like private, that'd be divulging. But you can say words that are none of that, that are actual real words, part of the English dictionary, and it'll cause these platforms to interrupt like that. And so that a little bit proves my point. You hadn't actually done anything to Arthur Avalon. Is that in this reality you have nothing of entire freedom or entire binding. There's always some degree of liberty and binding. Like say you have people that are incarcerated, right? When people are incarcerated, there's probably deprivations and suffering there that are unspeakable, that are unimaginable without that experience. Heaven forbid. However, there are probably silver linings and graces and accommodations and mercies and actually something of freedom that would be involved there. So like say you have some people that are incarcerated, right? They're out on the yard exercising during the day, right? The same time they're exercising, you have people in free society that are doing jobs that they don't like, that they're suffering through, that they're dying in. You can have someone like you might at the same time you have a firefighter, right? You have a cool, sexy job, a New York firefighter, right? It just got done taking the photo shoot, right? Heaven forbid it's now a famous day in history in September take place, right? You have would you rather be a sexy calendar firefighter or an inmate? Which one would you rather be? Now think about this. On a certain day, they say that some of your prisons in New York, I can't think of the famous ones off my hands, but you have some prisons in the New York State area that are some of their most formidable prison. Now, a prison is a prison, but among your prison, some of your prisons in New York are reputed to be the prison of prisons, right? In New York. But on a certain day, a famous day in September, about almost like a quarter century ago, on a famous day in September, would you rather have been a sexy firefighter that just got done taking a fire? I don't mean to be heinous with this, but for the sake of learning, would you rather be a sexy firefighter that got your life in order, your life together, but you're also about to have your last day on earth, and it's about to be a horrible day for you and your people and the nation? Not that you wouldn't repeat it if you could do it again because you believe in something, not the least of which was possible through the Constitution, but through your country, but that by the Constitution. Or would you rather be an inmate upstate at the toughest prison, reputed to be one of the toughest prisons in the United States, but you're actually outside exercising. You're hearing the news about what's happening, and you're exercising, and you may go home in 3 years from now. But when you actually do get to go home, you're actually stronger and more disciplined and more organized and more efficient from some of your training in prison and institutionalized, such that, and you also has like maybe some skills or some inroads and opportunities to where when you get back into free society, you may be actually having experiences that people in free society ain't having. Like you may actually have a sturdy job, you may have a car, you may even have something cool to do on a Friday night. You may even be blessed with a family. You just got done being incarcerated for this many years, but you still amounted to having a new family when you got out. Some people that were free didn't had not and may not get up to that point, and some people also that were free were also dying while you were in prison. They were healthier, have more of livelihood, more of respect, more of esteem, more of different things, but they actually were in the process of actually dying while you were in prison. So that's an example that there are certain freedom within anything, even fettering, even freedom from circumstance, or freedom to read something, or freedom to exercise when you could otherwise be doing something less than desirable, even in what's called free society. So according to Arthur Avalon, nothing is entirely bound or free. Nothing, and there's also nothing is entirely free. So we're in the American society, and we have a lot of liberties. We don't actually have freedom, but we have liberties, because freedom is unalloyed, inalienable, and They say that the talents of when this life blesses you with a talent, they're irrevocable. If it's really because it's who you are. You as you shall exist as yourself, as you have not compromised yourself as yourself. You are irrevocable. What's really you. Um, so so freedom itself is irrevocable, but people actually can't take your freedom, but they can take your liberty and your understanding of yourself, which your understanding of yourself is part of accessing your freedom. But so in because our freedoms can be taken from us, they're not actually freedoms because that would be alienable, and freedom is inalienable, unalloyed. but your liberties can be taken from you. And we have some of freedom. We are always free as human beings, but we have profound liberties in the United States. But we don't have entire, when you have outright freedom that can't be taken away and is not limited, that's called carte blanche. We don't have carte blanche freedom, such as I'm on an online platform, a reputable platform, but I actually can't say anything out my mouth without cause the actual the live stream to mess up. So you got to tiptoe around. So just that tiptoedness around certain words, these big old bad. Now words are big and bad, but you got to tiptoe around these words. Otherwise, you're at it. Your stream is done, and it'll look like it's messing up, but it's actually is messing up on purpose because you're messing yourself up like that. That shows that we don't have carte blanche freedom, but that's not exactly bad because some of those things are protecting you. So it probably has like ramifications that this fool, he's saying anything out of his mouth, that's good to go. But he's also about to say something stupid to get himself in trouble or the platform in trouble. So let's just hurry up and help him out by giving him a little bit of quiet, just a couple of seconds of quiet to think about what he did and run that back. That's not all the way bad like that. So that's like life itself. Is that life allows you to make choices, but also you're protected within your choices partly by the ramifications of your choices. So sometimes when you get yourself in trouble, the trouble you got for yourself by your own ramifications, that protects you from a worse trouble if you had been spared the ramifications of your own doing. So that's not all the way bad. But just that there's a combination of freedom and fettering, but then also the United States, the land of the free, the home of the brave. We have a lot of freedom, but we don't have all the way out right freedom. We have a combination of the perception of freedom, the appeal of freedom, and something of freedom. Just like in life, you don't get all the sexiness all the time, but sometimes you do get some really sexy shit. And what that would be is a combination of the appeal of the S word, the perception of the S word, and then the experience of the S word, some combination thereof. So the United States is like that. It's a combination of the appeal of freedom, the perception of freedom, and the reality of freedom. But it's not all the way one the other. And they also reinform the experience of one the other, such that a lot of people the world over, if we're being honest, they have benefited from or been impressed by. Even sometimes when you fight something, you're also a little bit impressed by what you fight. People have been impressed by some combination of the freedom of the United States, the perception of freedom, and the reality of freedom. But we would have had none of that, not even the perception, not even the some of the reality, not even some of the appeal, without the footing of what was afforded to the original settlers in the understandings that were appropriated as the Constitution, is what I'm saying. So when people are willing to fight and die and put it on the line for the Constitution, not only so you're willing to fight and die not only for your family at home, but in the first place for the Constitution, which gives your family their experience of enjoyment that's worth living for. Because some other iterations of reality, people have said, like my father comes from Africa, and he would visit places in South Africa. No, my father's already he's from Namibia. They had a lot of poverty. They existed on reservations similar to the United States in Africa. When like I visited the reservation as a child. Some of my earliest memories in this existence are from the reservation. I'm not from the reservation, but I had experiences there as a child because my father was trying to move there in the early 90s, but it wasn't viable then. With a family, he figured that out. It wasn't viable. But even him growing up on the reservations and the kind of deprivation that they would have growing up that make him want to come to America. Sometimes he would visit South Africa, like the roughest parts of South Africa. Like I'm thinking of I don't mean to blast people's hoods, but I'm just going to talk about a real hood right here. He would talk about a place called Soweto, Africa. That if you know like the shanty towns of Africa, the suffering in the form of poverty, some people say that South Africa is one of the violent places that you can imagine. The violence is actually the economic disparity. That violence is a mode of suffering that's from economic disparity, but it's not all of economic disparity. It's not the only, and it's not even the wickedest disparity, because even if you get to experience violence, you were alive enough to experience violence. You had to eat something to experience violence. Some people don't even get to eat. Different times in Africa has been like that. Like say the Sudan. I know that in the 80s, the Sudan was experiencing suffering as has not been as is unimaginable. And it's one of the most beautiful pictures I ever seen One time I had jury duty. I was courted for jury duty like years back, like when I was a clerk, like I mentioned in the first video of this series. And they had a National Geographic from the 80s of Sudan, the one of the droughts that happened in Sudan in the 80s. You see these people, right? They ain't got nothing. They ain't got nothing but life. You don't know how they're alive. They actually can't be alive without grace. Like some people, if you look at your own life, you couldn't have actually come through what you've been through and be existing now without grace going on. You couldn't have done so. It's not actually humanly possible to survive a lot of life, even when things are stable, without grace. So you had these people in the 80s in Sudan living off of nothing but grace. Like one time when I was in a training venue, this person was talking about fasting, and when you fast and read scripture, the scriptures are your sustenance at that point. That's what you're living off of, the scriptures, when you're going through that much of fasting and hunger. But I don't think these people in the Sudan even had access to scriptures. All they had was their faith. And if you look at some of these people smile, like in Sudan in the 80s, National Geographic, that's one of the beautiful things you may see in this life. Beautiful as some of the things that we've seen in sports, in music, in art, more beautiful than all that would be a simple, real smile that you see these people in starvation. And the reason they're smiling is because they have faith. They have nothing to smile for now but faith. And if you look at some of the best times in your life, I think some of the times in my life, like after times since we've had the people sitting in office who are in office now, I'm not saying they're responsible for that, but they're some responsible of some of the climate that gave me some of the worst experiences in my life. And at that time, I actually missed some of that time, even though I had not a lot going on for me, very little going on for me. All I had going on for me was honor. I'm sorry, was faith and hope, and then some experiences that came from me being honored, because I have some honors around things that I did in my community, that I would be allowed to do things like work in healthcare around vulnerable people. I had to have a degree of honor to do that, and it was an honor to do that. And I also had hope while I was doing that. I would listen to music a lot, and the music gave me hope. Even some of your ratchet hip hop music, which you call ratchet, just these hard beats like that. Damn, one day I might make a beat like that, or I like to make some music like that. I like to make some sexy shit like that. I like to make some money getting that shit like that. Not necessarily make money like that, but just some money ass getting shit vibes like that off of beats. I think I can really do that. I've done a little bit of that at one time, and I'm messing around with doing that in school right now on Sundays, because I'm making a melody class for 9 weeks and a harmony class for 9 weeks. And we got to make a beat every week, and I'll make mine on Sunday. I'll see a little old lady across town. I'll take care of her in the morning. I'll get a ride home with my mom. I'll buy some sturdy coffee. There's a coffee shop in St. Paul called Mudslinger. It's like a little hut stand, and they got this thing called an awake drink. They got like 5 shots in there, and it keep you awake. I'll have that me on a Sunday, and I'll make a whole beat in one day. I'll mess around with the keyboard, and I'll make a beat from scratch in one day. And the constriction of the time to get it done in one afternoon like that, it actually helped with the creativity. And I could anticipate, and I damn well may likely would make me a beat in one afternoon like that. And that was some real hip hop vibes for me. I enjoyed that. So nothing but me and my mom in my living room. I lived in my family living room like that for a long time while studying, while serving people in need, because of the accommodation of my mother's vehicle and my skills as a medical professional and a patient person. And so there wasn't a lot to, and I was also not feeling safe in the community and in my own home, because of my appearance. And I missed some of those times because of the hope that was present, and the faith that was present, and a little bit of the trust that was present, but more so the hope and the music like that. But so hope is the most beautiful thing. If you look at some of the times in your life, it's not just the experiences that you had going on, but the actual energy that you had going on. And I would say the better part of it was actually the hope. Like sometimes if you like say you were like in some kind of training video, like say you were upstate, incarcerated, or you're upstate at some training, right? And it's like, damn, I remember when we first came here, man, our ass were green, man, but we still had hope, right? We didn't know how wicked this shit was about to be, but I miss some days. And you see the new people come in, you're like, that, like some people would say, like there go the fresh fish, right? I'm not like a big dog from upstate, but I'm just saying we all know what fresh fish mean, right? But not in the terms of being egregious like that, but some of the things that like they actually still have hope like that. And that's what's beautiful. Like, damn, there go to people with hope, man. I remember what it was like to have hope, man. Like, damn, so when you're in a hopeless place, the only thing that reminds you of hope is people that still got a little bit of hope, that are still new enough that they got a little bit of hope. But back in some of the best parts of your life, like part of the beauty of childhood was rough. If you think about your childhood, it was rougher than you think it was. It was really rough. You were going without. You were watching other kids have a lot of stuff. You were watching TV have ads, stuff you can't have. You were having to do homework that was hard for you. Like, you think about like 6 hours at school. That's a long day, man. Like, when we're adults, 6 hours ain't that bad because we have a different understanding of time, and like we have different we have different blessings as adults, intellectually, mentally. But 6 hours is hard enough for adult, but that's hard for a child. You put a child through all that. So a lot of, I got that from Robert Greene, is that he said that children suffer more than people think. They suffer. Children suffer all the same things as adults: violence, poverty, deprivation, um, injustice, but also they suffer powerlessness because they don't have any. They have the same sufferings, but nothing of power and autonomy. Children don't have none of that, but they have hope. So part of what's beautiful about childhood, and what you may miss about your own childhood or appreciate about other children, is not that childhood is better than life itself, generally speaking, because a lot of things that you would like to enjoy as a child, you can enjoy it better as an adult. People have said that before. I'm not the first one to say that, but people say you can enjoy it better as an adult. But the unique thing about childhood is the hope in it, is that it's beautiful with hope. So in the Sudan, in these pictures, they would have hope. But my father, he would talk about South Africa, and he would say that when he would go through the hoods of South Africa, because he chaperoned adult students that were studying abroad to go over to South Africa to visit. And he said that he couldn't imagine, like, he couldn't imagine how you could live in that much poverty, because he said that it was harder than life, right? Like, that much of poverty. He couldn't. I never saw very many things strike fear in my dad. The only thing I ever saw strike fear in my dad was poverty. Poverty is the only thing that strike fear in my dad. And my dad, as sturdy as he is, a former freedom fighter or freedom organizer, that has smoked with them people in Africa, them people that were sturdy around around mayhem for innocent and young people, them atrocities in Southern Africa. The only thing that struck fear in him, and he couldn't understand how people can live in that situation without that. But so I'm saying that, so when people are willing to fight for their country, right, and their family, if you actually were from a bad enough situation, it may almost not be worth fighting for your family if your family got that bad, because you may not have no family to send back for it, because they may not be surviving if it had been that bad. Your family don't have nothing to enjoy, but also they don't survive if they don't have this standpoint to do that. So when you're doing the toughest of fighting, it might not also be for your family. It would be for what gives your family a standpoint to have a life. And for the United States, that's the Constitution. But I'm saying that that's the tradition of the indigenous people, is what. So what America has of the aesthetic, of the perception of freedom, the appeal of freedom, and some of the reality of freedom. What's good to go about that, and what's real in that, is from the mercies and the blessings of the indigenous people here, and their understanding of the land and of one another upon the land, that has amounted to what we have, largely as the value in the Constitution. So when people are saying, it doesn't matter who's in office, but I'll fight for the Constitution, I swore lethal oath. I swore by, and I stand by the Constitution. No, what you actually stand by is the traditions of the Native people. If you what's viable in that, and what's real about that, and what has given us this much, has been the traditions of the Native people. And I wanted to be one to say that, because that occurred to me, because I spent some time around some Native people recently without aiming to do so. I had spent some time, and I come to understand that what you're leaning for, and what's humbling, and what's life sustaining and life affirmative, is the traditions of the people. And I'm not limiting that to the Iroquois and Anansi, but not the least of which being them. But so that's what you're saying when you're swearing allegiance to the Constitution like that, because them pilgrims, them settlers, they weren't actually that savvy. Because how could you come from, because my father tells me that the way he deals with people, my dad is, he can be very perceptive around people, and he knows what he's getting himself into around people. And he says that the way he appreciates people is that he just considers what is a person's background? How did someone grow up different than myself or similar? That'll give him a half a clue about what's about to jump off around someone, have been their background. But you got all these settlers come here from Europe like that, right? They came up under feudalism, under a lack of freedom. How did they come up with this sublime document called the Constitution? They did not do so. They appropriated it. All they likely could do was write English very well, like some lawyers, because they had been lawyers, right? These learned people, these law people, these governors, these planters, whatnot, these polished people from the seats of erudition back then, which they had been real erudition back then and real learning going on, like in Europe, like to be polished around like words, but the actual understanding and the harmonies that have been your traditions of your native people, if you want to be honest. Um, but but so in the time of in the time of the election, like 2015, the election cycle of 2015, that had been some real the climate of 2016 was very significant. Then I think at that time you had an assassination at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, right? So you had a lot of fighting over you had a lot of fighting going on, so in up to 2016, right? So we had the wars in the middle, the no the conflicts in the Middle East is what they're designated. I think that when you designate something a conflict, that would have implications about what resources and weapons can be allocated, and some of the rules of engagement that would be governed by the Geneva Convention. I imagine they'd be different when you designate something a conflict versus a war. I think that there'd be some a little bit of that's a deeper thing legally, because you actually can't you can't do any, so anything you do in this life has ramifications of harmony. You may not do anything without ramifications of harmony. I can sit up anywhere and play my instrument, but if I'm not actually being harmonic with it, I can get ran up out of somewhere with the instrument if I'm not being harmony. But it's actually the same with your war mechanism, is that your wars, they take a certain amount of harmony, reciprocity, cooperation, that is, to get done. Like, there's this woman who wrote this very I don't mean to be heavy, but it's a heavy topic. This woman wrote this poem during the time of they, again, in the 70s, 60s, 70s in Southeast Asia. They call something else a conflict, not a war. And what this person said is that she made a reference that when they pay something each year, that as all people have to in the United States, they are subsidizing the suffering that goes on in these conflicts in Southeast Asia, and currently in the Middle East. But she put it in poetic terms. I won't quote her because it's a little bit heinous how she wrote that, but she was meaning to be big about it, but it's still heinous what she said. But the way she said that, but it was a metaphor. But what it actually is that these different things, they cost. Like these different atrocities also cost. Conflicts cost. And so it's interesting. So when you go fight other people, other European people, you call that a war, right? So the Revolutionary War, that was European on European. The Civil War, that was European on European. World War One and Two was European on European. But then you go to Southeast Asia, you call that a conflict. You go to the Middle East, you call that a conflict. That's interesting, but it also probably has to do with the ramification and the tactics, because even as atrocious as these different wars were, they probably didn't pull out all the same stops. They probably didn't pull the same punches and pull out the same stops and use the same tricks on other European as they do on indigenous people, if we're being honest. And they probably didn't get the same cooperation and the same rigor and fervor the same way. Now, I'm not saying less or more, but you probably didn't have the same fervor of the troops the same way versus our European countrymen and the indigenous people of the. I'm speaking as an American serviceman. I'm speaking like an American service member to say that. To say our European countrymen, we don't have. It's not less than or more, but we actually don't have the same intent and attitude and support and subsidy going against our European countrymen as we do against the indigenous people that were causing conflicts in Southeast Asia and the Middle East, and then also in World War II, the theaters, the European theater and the Eastern theater, as it's called, the Axis powers of the East and the West. It had the actual, when it got to be dropped, the bomb. They saved the bomb for the Axis power. That is also people who are indigenous to Asia the indigenous of Asia, that is the Axis powers of Asia, they let them have the bomb. I'm not saying that it could that they would have been. It's just it's significant that the bomb would have got dropped on the indigenous people, not the European countrymen. If you think about that, but then so also they probably have a different fervor and intent. The troops themselves and what they how they would engender their mind versus European countrymen and indigenous people of the Southeast Asia and the Middle East. If we're being honest, I'm not saying it's less or more hell, but I'm just saying it's different like that. But then these the conflicts as it existed. So I think that in the conflict in Southeast Asia, as much of mayhem and suffering on both sides, on all sides of that conflict, took place in Asia. I don't know that anything recognizable took place, real war acts of war took place upon the American soil that we know of, other than actually Watergate. That would have been the highest cabinet was doing that to themselves. So the only what we could say crime that has to do with that's part of politics in the war, or I'm sorry, the conflict of Southeast Asia. The only thing we know of would be Watergate. But then during the time, the Middle East, I'm sorry, the conflicts in the Middle East, from two, I think that was so you had the what took place in New York City around 2001. Then the rollout in spring of 2002, they were having the media campaign to get people know that that it had been about the next conflict. They rolled that out on the TV where they show like these random bombs, missiles going into air that aren't about to strike nothing, but they're just sending out the media campaign and to get people the beginning of the beginning of the recruitment material had come out. Oh dang, they're putting missiles in the air. It's actually interesting that at that time around 2000 the year 2000, I was a freshman in high school, and I used to rock with the group Outkast. If you make something public, then somebody can reference it publicly. The group Outkast, they were popping when I was a freshman in high school. I'm sorry, Miss Jackson. I am for real. Never meant to make your daughter cry. I just something had been Outkast. They were bigger than life when I was a freshman in high school. But then also they had a song, Bombs Over Baghdad. They had that song, Bombs Over Baghdad. I'm not sure if that was coming off of the older conflict in Iraq that they would do that, or if it was preemptive, or if it was just providence or coincidence or serendipity or fate or any of the above that they would have that song, Bombs Over Baghdad, just barely before 2001 when you had that go on, and then you actually have a media portrayal of bombs over Baghdad, that they're showing actual missiles flying over Baghdad to hit God knows what for God knows what reason over Baghdad like that in early 2002. But then all the way from then on, from 2002 until actually the present office had left the Middle East. But you can't just go over and cause trouble and just leave and not still be trouble there, because it's still trouble for those people. So I'm not saying that conflict's over even for those people, because they're likely still suffering under that. The people they've lost, the talent they've lost, and the economic deprivation and the cycles of deeper poverty that would beset them with. Um, but so from that point, from the bombs over Baghdad on the TV in 2002, we didn't actually have anything take place of war that we know of on the American soil that we know of, except for the Pulse nightclub, because you had different active shooters. Like I grew up in the 90s, and the first famous active shooter that I knew of was Columbine High School in the late 90s. Like I think that happened in like 98. I was in middle school at that time. Columbine High School, they've been like that, set their precedent. But it's interesting that Columbine High School, that came up. You for sometimes you don't, so like you all these back in the 90s we would go to Blockbuster a lot, right? Nobody had none of cool, whether you were cool or not, or an athlete or a nerd or socially cool or not, you likely didn't have nowhere cooler to be than Blockbuster on a Friday night if you're keeping it real. You didn't have nowhere cooler to go than the movie store, because wherever you had to do cool or not, it would have likely been around movies, and it wasn't cooler than the movie necessarily. So in the 90s, you would have been at the movie stores, and all them movies in the 90s, all them flicks, all them 90 flicks had been gun flicks. You could another way to spell the word 90s had been gun flick. 90s gun flick. Gun flick like that. Bang bang. We fell. I still remember we fell in love at the Bang bang gotcha, shoot 'em up movies, yeah. Um, that's a dope song. Bang Bang Gotcha Shoot 'Em Up Movies. Yeah, that's a sexy, but that's actually the '90s. Bang Bang Gotcha Shoot 'Em Up Movies. But also with that, you can only watch a movie so long till you gotta participate in it, right? So then there go the video games, right? The video game. So you got all these movies, right? All this gun this and die this, Beverly Hills this, low down dirty this, all that stuff. Autumn flicks got a gun like that, just a gun. You could have just made a movie about a gun getting built, a gun getting sold, a gun getting over on somebody, and then maybe somebody fall in love around there, and there go your movie like that. That's a '90s flick. But you can only watch something so your life goes wherever your eyes goes. People say that your hands go where your eyes go. Like hand-eye coordination is way deeper than people think, but also life-eye coordination is way deeper. So wherever your eyes go, your life is gonna go there. So you watch this much of it. At a certain point, you're gonna have to touch something, right? It go from watching to touching, right? So you watch stuff you're not supposed to watch at night. You can only watch it so long before you gotta touch something, right? That's the first step to actually having that kind of lifestyle, likely, right? But then also you watch this many movies about this many shoot 'em up, and you gotta touch something, right? So what? But you also don't want it. You know better than to touch something that's gonna get yourself hurt, right? Or lose your freedom, right? So what safer way to touch something, but still touch something because it's real when you're touching something than a video game controller? So these video games they popped up on the scene right there. So what had been the first one like that? It had been I think it had been like Doom or Duke Nukem, right? So no, my bad, Duck Hunt. Duck Hunt had got it started like that, right? So you had like you had like Atari in the '80s. You had Nintendo, Mario, and most of them they're a lot about like jumping and ducking and stuff like that, right? But then like Tupac said, one of these days we got to I don't mean to mock Tupac like that, but it's actually teachable. One of these days we gotta bust back for the home maze. So you start out ducking Mario. It's like now think about this. When I was in the '90s, my dad had a problem with alcohol, but his friend also had a problem with letting his kid play video games, and he messed with the alcohol a little bit. And they would have these deep ass conversations that have kids ass up. I don't say kids. They have kids up way later past curfew, right? But my friend growing up, he was hilarious. He was really hilarious. But he had an addiction to video games. So he used to be like he used to have something to say about everybody, but he had a real problem about video games. But we'd be at his house way up later than we're supposed to be. The doors open. All them cool kids are in his complex. You have 4 complexes, but his complex had the cooler kids, if we're being honest, pound for pound. They start filtering in and out the door at night, them nighttime vibes, them nighttime Nintendo vibes, where the adults are distracted with their own political conversation, the righteous conversation, but they're also compromised conversation and mocking because they're partaking of the same shit that kills people and kills countries by killing homes, that is alcohol. But they're actually doing that, and it's good to go. So you couldn't imagine we had a lot of rounds going on of them Nintendo vibes. But I like the vibe. I wasn't all about Nintendo because my mom knew better than to let me play with that stuff then. But I like that shit. It looked cool on the TV, and them sounds were cool and stuff. But some of them kids, they really had a problem with that shit. You knew they had a real problem because you couldn't tell where the TV stopped and the Nintendo stopped and where their self stopped. You couldn't tell that when they have a real problem like that. The way they would look at that thing like that, because you actually are what you're thinking, and that is you are what you're observing. So they were the damn Nintendo like that. So my friend growing up had been Nintendo. As good and bad as that can be, my friend had been named Nintendo. Um, but at a certain point, you're ducking and dodging like that. But damn, we gotta return fire, man. One of these days, we gotta buzz back for the homemade. So Mario, you didn't see Mario pull out that shit, but he somehow it got all the way on a duck hunt. So you don't appreciate that duck hunt. You got kids putting their hands on their first weapon. Now it's a digital weapon, but it's actually reminiscent of a weapon, and it's actually a real shot. That's really, heaven forbid, if anybody ever really shot something before, it looked exactly like it looked on Duck Hunt. It's like, oh shit, you just hit that shit and you seen some feathers and it go down like that. Like, damn, did I just do that? Like that's what it looked like. I'm not talking about, I'm just saying that's what it looked like to hit something. The same way it looked in Duck Hunt, that's the way it feel to put your hand on a weapon, not be used to be a weapon, but it's actually kind of cool. And you actually just nail one of them. But that one's actually a goner now. And what that means to you for the rest of your life and the rest of what would have been that thing's life it'll garner like that. That's Duck Hunt is way more realistic. So you got kids putting their hands on weapon, but it's also way more realistic than you think. But then things don't stop. So the '90s had gone on further with the gun flicks, but also with the gun video games. So you got on to Doom and Duke Nukem. So a lot of them old school '90s games, you might have shot something in them, but the first active shooter had been Duke Nukem and Doom, I think. But Doom, I think. But you more so had to be PC with that because that shit it wasn't all the way good to go for kids. Back then in the '90s, as much as they were egregious around like violent stuff, they actually didn't let kids like do that active shooter stuff like that. You had to actually have a PC, I think, to play Doom. That's significant. You would have had to been competent, privileged, but also mature enough to be familiar and sturdy around a PC to get to play Doom. And in the '90s, you like everyone didn't get to have access to video games, but also it was more of access to have a computer or an adult that actually knew how to get computers to work because you probably would have had to have CD-ROM. So you would have had an adult to actually understand how to use a CD-ROM a little bit or a computer. And then so you would have had to have a special degree of privilege and access to access Doom and Duke, if you think, or Duke Nukem and Doom, if you think about it. But then you got to like later in the '90s, you had 007, right? Everybody played 007. But 007, it was fun, but it was actually kind of real. Like you have a sleepover and we're killing shit on here, right? And at the end of it, it would detail like who was the most hated player, who was the best marksman, who was the most deadly, who was the most cowardly, based on your real conduct in 007. So if anybody have any question about my background, right? You have any question about my background, all I'm gonna say is I understand this much. If you were to be if you come over to sleep over at my house, right? If we took a time machine to the '90s or present day, right? I had some cool people. I'd more so appreciate sexy company. But if I had some sexy company or some sturdy company, you come over my shit and you want to play 007, you want to have a sleepover 007, throwback. If you're gonna keep it real, it gotta be throwback because I don't know about them new games. They got different controllers right now. Them Nintendo 64 controllers that look like elephants, they were actually a little bit better for that first action shooter shit if you knew how to use them. Most people, right? Everybody, a lot of y'all watching me, you grew up around 007, right? I'm flexing. I gotta slow down before I actually get myself in trouble. I think that a lot of people watching this that played 007, you actually didn't know how to use that controller to play 007 because real fighting in this life, in this world, in probably these realities, as you want to say, realities, existences, real fighting is about footwork. That's whether you're boxing, whether you're kickboxing, whether you're wrestling, whether you're even talking shit. Like where do you stand when you're talking shit? Whether you're slap boxing, damn near even whether you're thumb wrestling, even if you're playing a video game. Real fighting is about shooting. I mean, sorry, real fighting is about footwork. Even gunplay is about footwork. So if you play the old school 007, you actually need to use there. So you have like the joystick, you have the trigger, you have the top like the first original L1 and R1, but you also got them little yellow buttons on the top right. On 007, those little yellow buttons are the side step. That's like up on the middle, the top buttons like that. So like everybody's on there like they're like going like this to the level. You see his ass, he just went that way. You see the little rocket. You see him go like that, but you didn't see that fool that come in there. That's how you get over on a fool in 007 is with them sidestep like that. I'm not the first one to know that. I grew up around this little dangerous ass kid, man. This kid I grew up around, he was like a year younger than me, and he was. I had a friend. That friend, he taught me a lot about life because he was savvy then. But he had this little buddy, this little sturdy buddy that was like from one block away, and I didn't know that fool, and I wouldn't have known him without my friend. And that fool, he was a sturdy fool like that. He was sturdy as hell because my best friend, he was. I respected him and his. I respected his whole family. I'm better for his whole family. But sometimes his mom didn't let. I would always want to borrow him because I needed competition for like one-on-one basketball after school. That's what I was about. But his mom wouldn't always let him come outside because she'd say, "Man, you need to be doing your homework first and the dishes if anything, but your homework before this basketball thing because I ain't got a problem with you playing basketball, but I got a problem with you messing up around your priorities." Is what she was teaching him. The exact appropriate thing to teach a person. That's the appropriate word. That's appropriate. That's appropriate right there. When you're saying appropriate this and that, what you're saying is priorities. Because anything, there's a time and place for anything, even anything. but priorities is what matters. Even prior to in anything, priorities matter. That's what the word appropriate means, priorities. So she was teaching him the right things. But one time I said something around this other little clever dude around like, man, but his mom be I did not call her out her name. I was like, but she be mean, man. She don't let him come outside. Then we get around the three of them. She's like, yeah, man, that motherfucker has something to say about your mom, man. What you got to say about that? He was like, I was like, no, I didn't say anything. He's like, no, no, he said that shit about you. He said that shit, man. He said that shit, man. Right there, that motherfucker said that shit. He did. And then so he was like, he was a real sturdy dude like that. Like he ain't gonna, he didn't call me out when I said it, right? He was like, he just heard me say that. But then we get around the three of us, and I actually did love my friend and respect him and his family. But this other dude's like, that motherfucker said that right there, man. What you got to say about that? That was some bullshit he said, man. What are we about to do about this fool has said that shit like that? He's saying this and that about basketball, this and that, because your mom has said this and that about homework, man. Fuck that dude, man. What about this dude right here? But he was younger than us. He was physically smaller than me, but he was actually knowing he knew jujitsu back then. So we're in the late 90s. How many kids do you know that were messing with jujitsu in the 90s? Before MMA got popping like that. He knew about that. But then he also taught us how to play 007. You can't get it done without the footwork like that. So he'll get over on everybody's ass. At the sleepover, he get over on everybody. He actually wasn't fucking around with sleepovers, but if he would have got over on everybody's ass with them side steps like that. But them shooter games, them 007 time, that's how you go from the movies to the video games to the guns to the perception of walking through killing things have been the video games like that, the programming of that. Then you have Columbine in the 90s. Back then you had older iterations of Grand Theft Auto. Like back then you had this game called Driver, right? You had Grand Theft Auto and Driver before Columbine. I didn't have Grand Theft Auto. The old Grand Theft Auto, the graphics were kind of janky, the old Grand Theft Auto, but the plot lines and the ideas were cold. Like the old, damn, you about to go organize running down on some shit out of a car after you just jacked the car like that. That was like cool for a kid to see that. But then that would be on PlayStation, but you had like some kind of janky graphics. But then you had this game come out called Driver. Driver was like it was like Grand Theft Auto, but it wasn't as ratchet as Grand Theft Auto. It was just about driving cars, but it was very realistic. I went so far as to back then in the 90s, you could I didn't have a PlayStation, but my friend did. That same friend that his mom didn't appreciate us playing basketball before homework, and he had him a PlayStation, but I had the game Driver. I went out and rent the game Driver, and that game was so dope that we were having a sleepover, but we are having real smoke about who get to play the damn game for how long because it's only one at a time because it's like first person like that. But I was like, I said out my mouth, damn, if you could combine these graphics with Driver, with that game Grand Theft Auto, man, that shit would be wicked, man. If they could just do that, but that's what they damn well did. I wasn't the first. Great minds think alike. Them programmers were like, damn, what if we put Grand Theft Auto with the Driver graphics? And that's what they did with like the first, like I think that would have been like your first Grand Theft Auto 3, right? Grand Theft Auto 1 and 2, I think that had been the janky graphics. But Grand Theft Auto 3, that was the first Grand Theft Auto with some real ass graphics. And it had like them real ass storylines in the next city over. And you can't get to that next city unless you beat certain levels. And then it also got some weird like cheat codes. So it had this cheat code like the dodo bird, right? So that first Grand Theft Auto 3, you couldn't be having no airplanes in there. Like Vice City had actual airplanes and helicopters. That was the next step up in video games and graphics for cool shit for video games. But the Grand Theft Auto 3, it didn't have no sturdy airplane that I know of, but it had a dodo bird. It was like this broken airplane, and it don't all the way fly. Like it go up and it come down, it go up and it come down, so that you can't get over to the next island over. But I figured out a way how to make it like trot like that, like troll. Like I figured out a way how to get this half-ass airplane with the cheat code over to the next city over. But the game was such that you couldn't really stay in that next city without having actually made it there in the game. But you could hang out there for a little while. But as soon as you mess up, it'll send your ass all the way back like that. But I actually figured out how to get over on the game past the level. And I don't know if many people were sturdy enough to get over to the next island on Grand Theft Auto 3 without having actually made it there based on that dodo bird. I did that. But then that had been Grand Theft Auto 3 like that, where they combined, it made it very realistic like that. But 1 and 2 had been janky. Then Vice City was like some realistic stuff. But I think that the Columbine atrocity that took place somewhere between Grand Theft Auto 2 and Grand Theft Auto 3 existing, but also 007 existing. And if you, I don't know the history of Columbine, but if you were to tell me that the people that portrayed Columbine didn't know nothing about or never touched the game 007, as famous as that was in the 90s, I would have to call cap, not knowing the real history. Everybody was up on 007, including and likely the very perpetrators of Columbine. But then and then at that point, the active shooter stuff in America, it was more normal because the precedent was it from there. But I'm extrapolating that the precedent, it might have came from the video game first, from the act, it might have came from the realistic video games, then before that from the shooting video games, then before that, and then with all that the shooting movies, and then before that just the video games. So you go from Atari, you go from arcade to Columbine. You can extrapolate that. Though it didn't necessarily cause one the other, but it's correlated and intended and pivotal and influential culturally as the actual backdrop and the pretext in the environment and atmosphere where these active shooters popped up at. But then at the Pulse nightclub in 2016, that was an active shooter, like an AR style active shooter inside of a nightclub where people. So you have the Pulse nightclub, right? These are gay people, right? They're marginal. They're the most marginal members of society, gay men. Then in the 2016, they have one place where they can be themselves and they can be sexy like that. I don't know. If I had to, so they say according to King Noble, if you had to guesstimate the most marginal demographic as oppression goes in the United States, if you had to guesstimate it, it would likely be somewhere around a gay African American male, as their identity is not celebrated or they haven't come around to be empowered by it, as they would not enjoy the best of it. That may be your most marginal person, member, constituent. Generally speaking, relatively speaking, crudely, grossly, bluntly, I'm being very rough estimation. Your marginal member would be a gay black male, likely, because that gay person, that black male, they wouldn't be outside of the ramification of the process of destruction that is miseducation, misdiagnosis, medication, incarceration, extermination. As Dr. Umar Johnson has said it, a black male in the United States, they may or may not be within inside the teeth of that, but they wouldn't be out or within inside the net of that, but they wouldn't be outside the scope of that being intended for them and aimed at them in the United States. A black male wouldn't be. Then you add on top of that a unique, a brilliant, but sometimes difficult to navigate and understand identity, orientation, and being gay, and that can be very heavy, very beautiful, but also very heavy. But then also, if I had to imagine the least violent person, the person that would mean the least of violence, it'd just be a gay person, because gay people are about that is prejudice to say gay people, but a lot of people, like the people that would be that would have nowhere better to be than Pulse nightclub, I would have guessed that they wouldn't be out trying to hurt people. If anybody wasn't trying to hurt people, it would be them. They're trying to be sexy together like that. As everybody already marginalized them, they're finding a cool way to be together and be sexy while being marginalized. And you go bring an AR up in there. That's ratchet. But also, I think the person that did that, they were politically motivated. That there was political motivation, if not connection, to the Pulse nightclub. So that was your first actual atrocity that, if it's not caused by, it's correlated to the conflicts in the Middle East abroad at that time. And just that conflict engenders conflict, violence engenders violence. So you can't say what came first, the chicken or the egg. The AR or the atrocity had been the farmer come before all that. That is, the supplier had come before all that. So the supplier of these conflicts, of these weapons, is probably the same thing, and it's probably the real bad guy responsible for the stuff like that. And if they had a boss, it would be the enjoyment and privilege of gentrification that even these arms people aspire to. But that, I just want to point out that was 2016. The election cycle of 2016, where you had a very heightened political climate with the campaigning. So when the bosses get to arguing, when the influential people get to arguing and they take off the punches, everybody's in trouble. the boss is included, and everybody on down is included. So when you have that kind of smoke in the politics like that, 2016, that engenders like the just the climate for a lot of things that are not caused but they're correlated. It's just that you have a climate of strife, and it's ample opportunity for bad things to happen, including like the Pulse nightclub. So I just want to say that it's significant that the Pulse nightclub, that was one of your significant atrocities, but also it was one of the only one of the it had ties to the conflicts abroad, and so you could say that that was one of the times when the conflicts that were sequestered overseas actually reached back to home soil, had been 2016 like that. But what was significant around that time, at that that election cycle, I was talking to this savvy dude. He was like a security guard at one of the medical facilities here, and he told me some cool things over the year. Like he was saying that where I live at Minnesota, he was saying that he calls it a yo-yo state because a lot of people that live in Minnesota, they go abroad, but they actually find themselves right back to Minnesota where they came from, because that's still where some of your real resources and opportunities are. So you may not like the politics or like the culture in Minnesota, but as you try to flee that and you didn't actually have something to flee to, or even if you did have something to flee to, you might come back, because Minnesota, land of 10,000 lakes, that's a lot of, if you, in the future, water might be a real resource. It is now, if you're savvy, that's a lot of resources. 10,000 what? 10,000 lakes? That's a lot of resources. That's liquid gold. But then you also have infrastructure that's viable with that, also with the contribution and understanding of the native people going back, that probably, like in Minnesota, a lot of things, even Minnesota, that name Minna, that's reminiscent of native people. And then you have like Minnehaha is a name around here, Minnetonka. A lot of the names here are very reminiscent of the native influence, and probably whatever helped situate and stabilize Minnesota and the resources, including the Twin Cities. You probably couldn't have got that done without the assistance of native people. But he would say that Minnesota is a yo-yo state because it brings people back. But then he also said that I think you had some of these philosophers in Europe like a few hundred years ago, and they prophesied a person that would look just like our current person in office. I think it was one of your famous prophet, who's considered maybe a prophet, not a biblical prophet, but like a people's prophet. I can't remember that man's name. I want to say he had some thoughts about the end of the world. This person, and he prophesied someone that would appear like what the current person in office appears like. He This person referenced that is that it had been prophetic, it had been prophesied that there'd be a time, a significant time that would come about, and the person who was getting ready to come into office then in 2016 actually fit the description of that prophecy. Then at that time, 2016, there was a protest in Standing Rock. I'm saying that that's deeper than it seemed. In South Dakota, actually, I just had insight not to speak on what I was about to speak on. It had been there was a meeting. All people fight, all families fight, including broader families, including the indigenous people of the Americas. They have fought at different times. That's probably how they form their identity, is partly through fighting, partly through collaborating, but also through fighting. Fighting is part of what it means to be human. So different people are not wrong because they fight, but the indigenous people of the Americas, they have been at odds in going back. I understand from testimony of people that I know who are native, is that there had been a lot of very strong contention across native people going back. But at the time of Standing Rock, they came together. Probably likely in the past, there would have been like fighting, but then at different times, treaties, real treaties in collaboration, as sometimes our collective problem is bigger than our personal problem. That's a human phenomenon, but also a native phenomenon. I imagine that in the past, they would come together under unique circumstances. Standing Rock 2016 had been one such circumstance where there's a mobilization of native people in 2016, while they're at the end of so at the lattermost point of one of our most impressive and contended election cycles, 2016, there had actually been a mobilization of the native people, Standing Rock, where you had a collaborate. There was leadership, and there was time for hearing what had to be said, the contribution of the elders, the adults, and the youth. They were all important at that time. And on YouTube, some of those testimonies were significant. But there was a very strong representation in leadership of the youth at the Standing Rock protest. The youth of the nation over. They came together. That was probably a beautiful experience. Not beautiful because it wasn't. They probably wouldn't think there was nothing beautiful about that. I stand down. I apologize that there wasn't nothing beautiful about that other than the courage and the fight of the Standing Rock, but it wasn't just beautiful just because they had come together, because that had been heinous what happened to them and was happening. Because what they appreciated is that what they were wanting to do with the Standing Rock and what they did with the auspices of the incumbent office that got through and rammed through what they were fighting is that they were meaning to, and they further did, compromise a water source that the indigenous people of that area, like the Dakotas, like from for your North Dakota, and then I think you're skirting across the Midwest, like maybe parts of Minnesota, maybe Iowa and Illinois a little bit, I imagine, North South Dakota, that region. There's a water source, and it came to a head at Standing Rock, where you have the entire United States under. If you look at a map under it, it's like a sewer. Like you have these oils, right? These pipelines. I think at that time you had a pipeline, a major one around Texas, and it exactly was compromised and it leaked. It is bad when it leaked, and they knew that could happen, and it did happen. One of these major pipelines, I think, around that time or close to that time. But then they're intending to put one through the main water source of these promised land, treated land of treaty, reservation but protected Native American land, what's left of their land. You actually have no, just like you have in a modern reality, in our modern Western society, in America at least, that's viable because of the contribution of the traditions of the Native people and their understanding of people and the environment and the people upon the environment, the Native people and their harmonies. What we have now upon that and after that is viable because of your standing within a family. I don't think you have very much economic viability without dynamics of family. But then prior to family and what sustains family is the land. So you have no livelihood, you have no enjoyment of life, you had no furtherance of life without reciprocity and standing within an environment, because your environment fashions all your opportunity for shelter, for fighting, for fleeing, for love, for family, for food, for shelter. All that has no viability without land, but even the land is not viable without water. So no 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 livelihood, no manhood, no womanhood, no fun, no love, no children, no family, no livelihood, none of that. No no home, no family, no home, no none of that. No cooperation, no none of that. No land, no none of that. No water, no none of that. No respect, no water. So they were trying to take the last thing from the native people, is that the respect, to respect their humble water source like that at Standing Rock. And then so they stood on that because they knew what that was about, and God bless each member for that. Each person who partook of the Standing Rock protest or who felt a way about that, whether they were indigenous or not, God bless you for that. Each person that has learned a lesson that may have been agreed, that may have been on the other side of that, but they didn't want to be and they had to be fighting them there, or they learned enough to appreciate that was wrong. God bless you to understand that that was wrong to interfere with their water source. And then they stood on that. A lot of them, they probably were arrested and they compromised some of their standing. I would imagine you might have people to this day that can't vote because of what they did at Standing Rock, or maybe they can't do self-defense the same way they did at Standing Rock, or they may have been traumatized because you had men, women, and children there, including children, that saw their elders being water hosed, being barked at by dogs. That's traumatic. One of the most beautiful, the most profound things a child can experience is the actual an experience among people that's consecrated by tradition. I attended a powwow in the 90s, in 1992. There was a powwow in New Mexico it was commemorating the presence of colonialism. It had to do with colonialism. A powwow in New Mexico, rural New Mexico. I got to go. I got to leave school early that day, and I got to go with my. I had a family friend. She had been native from Alaska, but she was close with my mom, and I was close with her sons. One of her sons was like cooler than life to me because he was older than me, and then one of her sons was my age, and we got to go to this powwow that had to do with colonialism. But when we went there, we went off with some kids, and we kind of went away from the powwow into like some natural like terrain, some rugged terrain, as it was dusk and becoming nightfall. And it was so fun for a kid to actually get away from the adults and go get into nature. But you knew that if you got too far away from the people that were even letting you play, that were allowing you to play, you could really actually get lost. You could get in trouble as a child. You could be lost as a child if you got too far away of playing. But that's actually fun for a child because it's a little bit of danger and risk, and you don't get to actually have fun, real fun, without danger and risk. So there was actually the liability of getting lost going out into the bush like that in New Mexico at night, at nightfall like that, with the creatures like that, with the terrain like that. But it was fun. It was very beautiful. And then we got back. Sure enough, as soon as we could be no more risky than to actually get lost, we got back, and that was one of the deepest experiences of my life, to experience a powwow as a child that just got off from school, leave all them other fools back there at school with them textbooks, them bogus ass fiat ass textbooks that don't feel right for a kid looking at that stuff. But also what they're talking about them textbooks, see the real thing like that as very young. Like I was probably no more than second grade at that time. Probably been first, no more than second grade. But you imagine being at Standing Rock for a child, it would be very similar experience like that. But then also you got the dogs barking, you got the hoses, you got the improvised half-ass but more egregious ass handcuffs, zip tying elders in front of you like that. A little kid see something like that. That's real actual trauma if you want to use the word trauma for something. But so they had sustained that and they put up a real fight. But then as that was happening, the cabinet got in office then, and then they were incumbent then. And then one of their first order of business was to actually put an end to the Standing Rock, because the Standing Rock protest, it had actually been it had been a plea, because I think they were nonviolent. They were braver than brave, but they were also brave enough to be nonviolent. So a secondary commendation for being nonviolent. So they were brave enough to stand up, but they're also brave enough to employ nonviolence. That is, one of the young people at that Standing Rock, one of the young female leaders. I think she was still a child then, like a older minor, like a teenager. She was speaking on behalf of the youth, and she was saying that, how far can you push a person before they want to put their hand on something, right? How far can you really push a person before they say, one of these days we got to do something? And she still said that we're not about to do that because we have our dignity. But she also said, that young person said, that it had been prophesied by her ancestors 16 generations back, that 16 generations in the future, this day would come. So they were actually, that had been prophecy then. I think it was, I can't call the name. There had been a prophecy in Europe about 500 years ago about the appearance of somebody that would look like who had been in office or was getting in office then. Then about that long ago, maybe like 16 generations. I'm not sure how long ago that was. I think they said about that many generations. The native people had prophesied that such a day would come, that they would make a stand. Had been Standing Rock. So I think that what happened at Standing Rock is that a lot. If you appreciate your life, a lot of things haven't been the same since 2016. I know that my life, like the way I look now, I didn't all the way get up to looking the way I do now, thinking the way I do now, on purpose or consciously. Somebody had been just had been life gave me experiences to make me who I am. But a lot of that started to become what that would be around 2016 when the climate had been what it was. So it had been prophesied that such a day would come, the beginning of what led into. So sometimes you think that, oh yeah, we were all doing so good about that time, right? So about that time, 2016 on like that, we're all doing so good economically, right? But things got this bad, right? But sometimes you don't appreciate that things are a cycle, baby. So the same thing that put you up, bring you down, baby. So before you go on a roller coaster, you go down the roller coaster, you had went up the roller coaster. So yes, we did have certain things rocking like that time. We went up like that, but that's not outside of the calculus that would begin to put us down like that. It wasn't that only that administration that got us down like we are now, but the calculus that was part of that administration that got us down now had been like that. And the first order, so the beginning, what could seem like the beginning of the end, or at least a new epoch in American life, from that 2016 campaign cycle on like that. They had a chance to they had a chance to humble themselves by rocking with Standing Rock. But the first order of business was to ram through the Standing Rock, and they did put that pipeline through Standing Rock, notwithstanding the no pun intended, but notwithstanding Standing Rock and the protest and the mobilization and the dignity and the beauty of that, and the sincerity of that. They put through that pipeline, and it did spill like they said it would. No sooner did that pipeline spill and corrupt the Standing Rock water supply than our entire politics, our country, the coherence of it, the whatever we had of the semblance of the perception of cohesion as a nation, it went bad like that. And a lot of things been going bad since then, if we're honest. And they're still trying to get things together, right? That same person is now in office, right? Now, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do about this and that. They're fighting this one and that one. They're fighting this one and that one. People coming from different parts of the Americas, right? That is like old Meckham, as I understand. But Mexico, Central, South America, they're fighting these people, right? But what they got wrong is that, but those people are still the people of the land. If you're honest, people of Mexico, people of South America, Central America, they are the indigenous people of the Americas. And back in the day, right, before colonialism, they would have been getting between the Americas. They would have been getting between the land of Khalifa. I don't know actually the indigenous name of like the Midwest, South, the Southwest, the Eastern United States, the Northeastern, Canada, the Alaskas. These all have beautiful names, real names, but you actually don't get to know these names unless you earn them. I learned that from an indigenous person. They are not going to tell you the real name of that land, the name that's harmonic with that land, that land it has been fashioned upon that land, with living and loving and suffering upon that land. You don't get to know that name unless you earn that. So we're blessed enough to know the name of Khalifa and maybe Omecum, and some people may know these other names. You can look up these names. You can look up the name of any region of anywhere, but you can't have pronounced for you, upon you, to be possessed of having once been blessed with hearing the pronunciation of a name, of a land, of a people, of a land. You may not be blessed with such unless you had earned that and you had been brought onto that. You may not. But these people over the land, over from Omecum to Central to South America to Khalifa to the different regions of the Americas, they would have been travailing back and forth, and they would have been fighting to do that. Commission, you may still have. So what our person did, right? I'm not. I come to appreciate that. If I started out this broadcast saying that if you want to really have an insight about a solution to anything, listen to the song "Heal the Land" by by Fred Hammond. Nothing's gonna change until the land heals. No thing will change for you and I until the land is healed. Do you hear me? Do I hear me? Do we hear me? Do we hear us? Nothing shall change upon anything until the land is healed. And that too, you may not heal the land unless you have understanding to do such, had been the traditions of the native people then and now, which is then and now, had been the native people, but the local native people of anywhere. That's not limited to the Americas. If you want to get, so in Europe, it's appreciated that there were different atrocities happened to the wizened people that were called the witches, right? If you want to get Europe back right, you, my son, must go back to your people, my son. You must go back where you came from, my son, and you must find the wise that remain, my son, and they must teach you how to heal the land that you come from, my son, which is still you, my son, which is still me, my son, which is still them, my son, the wise ones, my son, which you had affronted and injured, my son, and had to flee you, my son, while they had been doing the best for themselves and for you, my son, which you had injured, my son, because you would like their resources, my son, and their self-respect, my son, to do well for themselves and yourself without your authority, which was maybe not as seasoned as them, my son. You must go back to your people, my son, and learn how to heal yourself, my son, and your people, my son, which is your land, myself, and the understanding that they have, my son, where you come from, my son. That's what you must do, my son. Did you hear me, my son? Where you come from, my son? Like that. So you had the wise people of Europe, you had the wise people of Africa, you had the wise people of Asia, you had the wise people of Australia, and you had the wise people of America, of the Americas. But locally, they know how to do that locally. In Khalifa, they would know the land in Khalifa locally. In the Dakotas, like the Lakota, the Sioux, they would know how to do that. In the Ojibwe, not only in the least of which, but I'm saying some of which that I know of. In the not I'm not ranking, but I'm just saying some that I would know from their areas. The Ojibwe of the there's actually names for these regions. It's known these regions. I don't mean to be egregious with that, but I'm just saying that I haven't been brought on to be privy to enunciate the name of these regions, so I'm not going to attempt the names. And also, I don't know the people or their names, but I know that some of which that would be local would be like the Dene of the Southwest, the Zuni of the Southwest, the Cherokee maybe of the Midwest, the Choctaw of the eastern the eastern United States, some of the Blackfoot of the eastern United States. The When I say Dene, that's I think that's called Navajo as the that might be had to do with the Spanish contact, but I think their original name is Dene. There's a brilliant channel called Navajo Elder Teachings. That might be the first clue for anyone that cares about the Constitution of the If you watch this channel and you care about the Constitution of the United States for any reason at all, that means anything to you. If you want to have a half a clue about that, you may watch. You are entitled to and you are afforded to watch the channel Navajo Elder Teachings, and also Taj Street Bey, who is a descendant of the Moors and can speak to a lot of the history upon the Americas. Anything that I've referenced, Taj Street Bey can enunciate it 100-fold better, and Navajo Elder Teachings can enunciate it 100-fold better. That's the first clue of insight into the land for anyone, anyhow, anywhere, is the actual the understanding presently locally. But that's not uncontested. There would have been conflict and strife between the different groups, and that would have had to been worked out between the different groups. And there is no diplomacy that is viable upon these lands to met cooperation and equity, which is the only justice that we may that we may hope for in this life. I think as human beings, there is no justice, no peace, no equity, no justice, no cooperation, no equity, no understanding, no cooperation, no tradition, no understanding, no elders, no youth, no adults, no tradition, no respect, no tradition, no respect, no nothing, no humility, no nothing, no apology, no humility. You must humble yourself, my son. I'm talking to myself with this too. I'm talking to all one and abroad mankind. You must humble yourself, mankind, and you must go to your people, my kind. Or if you have not the means or the courage to go to your people, you must humble yourself to the local people, and you must beseech insight into the land and the people upon the lands, or you shall have no peace. This thing to do about borders, there had been borders before there had been people. No, better thing than borders is people. There had been people here before there had been borders. Those people, they cooperated together and they fought together, and that is called life. But they were sustainable and viable this many iterations of eons. But you, my son, are not viable here, there, or anywhere for any future. You are not, because you have already lost your future, because you have affronted your elders and those who have come before you and those who are among you presently. You continue to affront them to the present day, my son. And your future is already gone, my son. But if you would like another future, if you would like a new future, you must heal your land, and you cannot do so without the insight of the local leadership and elders that had not left the land. Even though you displaced them and supplanted them, there is a remnant there, and you have no viability there. So this thing to do about fighting borders, especially as the Americas go from Mexico and Central and South America. These are the people of the Americas, and they will be compelled and inspired and interested in traversing the Americas, as is their instinct, as is their essence, as they are the land. And you will not handle that without the insight of the local elders and leadership locally in any region that you would be in. And it's not as broad as to say the entire region, the country over, because I would imagine that any people that provided insight into the Constitution, they were not all of the insight of the entire of the land. They were not all of that. I don't think that the founding fathers had access or were privy to all the Americas, because at that time the Louisiana trade hadn't been fashioned. Some of your settlers who would go out and from Louisiana purchase and map the Americas, including up to what would become like Khalifa, California, stuff like that. They had no insight. They had nowhere. They knew nothing past the Mississippi back then. I don't think the founding fathers, they probably knew less than that. They didn't even know the entire eastern hemisphere of the United States. They did not know that. So whatever you have for constitution does not embody all of the insight of the people of the lands, and it might actually be oxymoronic to actually that it might actually be a bastardization to put the insight of all the people of all the land together, arbitrary to your preconceived purpose and intended outcome, because they had a natural buoyancy of cooperation and fighting. That's your actual real. You like borders this much, right? You like preventing things. It's like, right. You're not wrong for that original. You're not the first one to prevent anyone from traveling, but you're the first one to do so with a document that you lifted off of somewhere, and think that it would be good to go there and really be confused when it wasn't good to go like that, because there would have been something of reciprocity, something there would have been something of migration, but there also would have been something of pushback with that, because you need that buoyancy, such as like you're not entirely conscious or unconscious. You have a buoyancy with that. We don't exactly have an atmosphere or lack of atmosphere. We have a buoyancy. We don't entirely have a livelihood. We have a buoyancy. We don't entirely have a partner. We have a buoyancy. We don't entirely have a family. We have a buoyancy. We don't entirely have ourselves. We have a buoyancy. We don't entirely have anything in education, a skill set, anything. We have a buoyancy. We don't entirely have a country. We have regions and buoyancy within those regions, and people within those regions, and buoyancy within those people, like that. And so you're first have a smack of a clue. Smack means like a taste that's left in like something. The first smack of a clue of insight into these lands, into cooperation in these lands, and harmony in these lands, is the people who understand the traditions of these lands, endemic to these lands, familiar with these lands, and of near lands. And so it would be the leadership locally, the traditional leadership locally as it still exists, is your only saving grace, I think. Otherwise, you're about to be ran down on because you don't know what you're doing like that. And the way that you prove you don't know what you're doing is that you didn't have enough respect to respect these people of water. These people that gave you this land, this perception, experience, and appeal of freedom, the combination of that, what you were able to afford of that was from their understanding that gave you the Constitution, and what you understand as having resource to go towards that, to fight for that, is by people's allegiance to the Constitution. Your own people, they don't have an allegiance to you, commander of anything. They have an allegiance to the Constitution. It stems from the tradition and the understanding of the people, and they still have that understanding. So the only resources that I know of, I'm not saying that it's limited to this, but the only ones I know of is Navajo Elder Teachings on YouTube, and Tashrik Bay. And I would recommend anyone to watch that, and I also recommend anyone to step light around it and watch it lightly, because these are real things we're talking about, and it's the real insight that is our freedom as we have any of it, and is our health as we have any of it, and is our memories upon this land as we have any of them, as it wouldn't have been viable without those traditions and those people. So that's I had a little bit more I wanted to talk about our native people, but I wanted to save that for another round. And just to say that, but it wasn't all bad. I think that the reciprocity between the native people and the European people, settlers, that made America become what it is. It's not all antagonism, because I met a Viking. I recently met a person who has both native ancestry and Viking ancestry, but he appears more so Caucasian, and he's versed in literate in Viking spirituality and native spirituality. So he spelled a rune for me, and he explained what is happening when he drew that for me. He was protecting us from wolves, because we were at an accommodation for people who are like a temporary accommodation, very decent place for people who are getting their lives together in the northern Minnesota. And there was a fire out there, and then like a lot of people there would smoke. And that's another thing I want to talk about, smoking, as well. I'm on it. And when you'd go out there at night, he pulled me out there one night. He's like, "Come here." And when we went out there, you could hear a wolf howling. But when the wolf heard us open the door, and the wolf could sense our presence, and they quiet down, he said, "Just wait, they're going to do it again." And so back in the day, right, things actually did not change. So back in the day, if you had a human settlement that was vulnerable, that was exposed, you would attract different animals because you're making different. You're probably not smooth with it. You don't know what you're doing spiritually or physically, largely, in that you're attracting a lot of attention to yourself, and you're not actually graceful enough. You're not. So that place we're at there right now, it's actually not without some native people there. It's not entirely graceful enough to stand up because there was actually wolves there, and most people wouldn't know what the wolves would respect or wouldn't respect. They wouldn't know that. But such is our footing in America presently is that we're precarious out here. I had a apartment that I was at in the fall. I was talking to like a savvy man. He's a Anglo man who's lived in Minnesota a long time at that very building for for multiple decades. But he was telling me, yeah, man, up here in Minnesota, we're vulnerable, man, because we're not very far away from Canada, but we're kind of vulnerable. We're out here like that. He appreciated that. Even as you got all this cool stuff, cities life, this and that, different jobs, this and that. Man, our ass out here in the woods, we're vulnerable like that, whether you had recognized that or not. But we're not all the way to good to go sturdy like that without the graces of the indigenous traditions to the present day like that, even around these wolves up there. But this brother was he spelled out a Viking rune and he explained what's going on when he did that. And then he also performed a ceremony for me. And when he did the ceremony for me, he explained the quality of the herbs that the plants that he's using for the ceremony, and he explained that these plants are not all the way good or bad. They're not good or bad. Some would be, some would not be, and some could be or could not be. That's what they are. But he has enough understanding about them is that sometimes when you puff on something and it's like, whoa, I'm up here, whoa, and it just knocked you off your ass like that. That's because you actually didn't know what you're playing with or how you're doing it. That's why I had knocked you off your ass is because all people are not the same, all plants are not the same, and how you would engage with people and plants is not the same. But if you don't have those traditions and you're just acting like that, you get hurt like that. So another example, so when he was there, he so I could appreciate him, but what he told me is that the Viking people, the Viking people had been the first Europeans to America. It's appreciated. That's like a lot of times people don't really riff on that or acknowledge that enough. Is that the Vikings had been the first European settlers to America? It's appreciated. Settler might be a little bit arbitrary because they didn't approach the native people as the word settler in conveys the imbuing of that. They didn't do so. So I'm making this from the land of Minnesota. And in Minnesota, that's a home of the Vikings. But you don't appreciate the actual real significance of the Viking history, the presence of real Vikings still, and also their spirituality is that the Vikings have a real. He enunciated and articulated a spirituality that when you can enunciate it and spell it like that, that's significant and it can have implications for you in the present moment. He can do that for you, and he didn't. He was very humble. He didn't look at it like that, but that's what he did for me. Then also he had the Native American understanding. But what he said is that the Vikings were formidable, right? Pound for pound, if arguably now nobody is a pushover upon this earth because you couldn't survive on this earth as a pushover. So no people are a pushover, but the Vikings are not the least of any people. But when they contacted the indigenous people, they actually didn't. They didn't. I don't know that they fought them the same way that the settlers did, and they did not conquer or intend to conquer the Native American people. They bartered with them. They exchanged with them. That is, they were reciprocal with them. But what I think is interesting about the Viking people, especially, and the Native people, but also just European people in general and the Native American people, is that we can't discount any. I think that it's arbitrary to even say people because if you say European people, African, Indigenous, Native American, Australian, you're being arbitrary in that you're putting a full stop. These people, that people, we're one human family, but we're endemic to different regions, and we have traditions and histories upon different regions, and bonding to different regions and with one another upon different regions, and that is to be respected, and that is unique. There's some unique propensities that come with that, probably detriments too, because detriments are all this life. It has different fail safes. So if you have a house, it has different exits. There's different things that will build something and humble something. If they wanted to tear down a structure, right, like this structure I'm in, right, there's probably exact ways that this structure can be broken down and that it was intended to be broken down if it had to be broken down. So things can be broken down like that. Such as the same with people. People have different shortcomings. You're not bad for having a shortcoming. Likely your strength is within your shortcoming, as in the exception proves the rule, as in Rudolph Reindeer. people can't stand Rudolph the reindeer. He's not acceptable among us, this Rudolph reindeer. But because he's different like that, he's special like that, he's unique, he's bright among these different. I'm not trying to call all these reindeers some. So brown nosing is bad enough. Whatever would make your nose turn like the regular reindeers, I don't know. But it probably ain't as nice as like Rudolph. But even him, he's not accepted. But on Christmas Eve, when we got to do things for the children who are more beautiful and more precious than even y'all with y'all reindeer lifestyles, we got to get on for the children. We got to do something for the children, just the children now. And so to do that, you need Rudolph to do that. He's the only one sturdy enough to do that. Have been Rudolph. Past all y'all with y'all entitled reindeer lifestyles like that. Yeah, gotta get Rudolph to get that done. But that's his weak point. His weak point is his strong suit. But people also have weak points and strong points. But it's good to be to know the strength of yourself and what's possible for you. You start with your weakest point, but also people collectively, if you appreciate humans as families. So a lot of families have a strong suit. Like I met a person who was talking mathematics, and he would seem like a genius, but if you talk to him, he actually comes from a line of engineers. So he's very intelligent, but he's not actually the same type of like of a genius the way that you would appreciate him if you just looked at something that he scrawled on a paper like that came from somewhere. It's been said that I read a book like by Twyla Tharp about creativity, and she said that some of your great musicians like Mozart, yes, he was brilliant. He's maybe more so brilliant than a genius as we're given the trope of geniusness because he came from a line of musicians. So he was a brilliant musician, but he also had the standpoint in the background and the pedigree and the opportunity and the support to blossom like that. It doesn't mean he wasn't genius because he had that, but he wasn't exactly out of nowhere just having these ideas like nothing like that. But everything take a little bit of a push. Even a genius, they can need a genius had so you're a genius, right? That much of a genius. As a genius, do you know how to ride a bike on two wheels? Are you smart enough to do that? Could you explain that in a book? Probably not, because some things are better. You can't actually explain some things. You got to feel them, right? But even you, as a genius who learned how to ride a bike by feeling it, did you not have some support of training wheels that were designed by someone? Did you not have someone give you a push as a genius? Is there such thing as genius without side of a push, even if that's hardship? But uh, but the European people as a family, European people are very sturdy around being rugged, like outdoors. Very like a lot. I've grown up with different European people. Like I've grown up. My family is Irish, German, and Welsh. I grew up around a lot of Scandinavian people, and I recently met Scandinavian people that, and then not far away there, I met Vikings recently. But a lot in Minnesota, you have Irish, German, and Scandinavian. A lot of that. I've been blessed like by the works of Arthur Avalon, who's English. And then I've known some people that are Italian. I had a brilliant teacher who was Slovenian, who got me on way past I ever would have got with a musical instrument. I've read books by people from like some Middle Eastern countries that are like a little bit blending between Europe and the Middle East. And then I think like in India, I don't know the exact how the history blurs between India, Africa, and Europe, but I know that the Aryan people of India, the actual Aryans, there's something to do with Europe and not very far away from like the Caucasus Mountains that would give you Caucasian. And then India itself, there's a deeper history between India and Africa. As I think you go south in India and the complexion is very dark, you have a darker hue of complexion, but also there's a lot of reciprocity with Africa and southern India. And then there's also a link between India and the Americas that's not properly known and enunciated. And the only time I heard a reference to it was by Taj Street Bey, who I've also referenced on here. And he said that one time he was visiting India and he was visiting a family there that they would like read a holy Bible. Like when they would read a book, they put gloves on to read it. That's how affluent they were. And they were impressed that he knew more of the history between India and the United States or the Americas and why you would actually call India the United States or America why you would derogatorily call the Native Americans Indians, and why they would have been ostensibly looking for India, but also competent enough to land in the Americas successfully and be accepted here successfully enough to get it back away safe with all their goodies. You would have had to have respect and be afforded the mercy to get all the way on back with the goodies, but the support here to regroup before getting back while you had thought you were going to India. all of that is not what we're presented. And I'm not saying I know that, but I just know that there's a deeper history between India and the Americas, India, at least South India and Africa, and India as the areas go, and the European people and the Caucasus Mountains. I know that much. I extrapolate that much roughly crudely from different things. But these people have, as human families, different strong suits as a family, because like you have a music family, you have a math family, you have a mechanical family. Some things run in lines of family because that's what they share with each other. And they, I guess they would have, if you have an interest in something, that's a form of talent in itself. An interest in something, engaging in something, is a form of talent in itself. So it's not that practice beats talent, it's that practice is talent. Talent is talent, and talent is practice, and practice is also talent. That you would do something is that you could do something, according to R.C. Tyler, and that you would practice something is the talent to practice something. So that's also talent. But one of the, what I've appreciated is that a lot of people of a European background, they can be very sturdy with like surviving in difficult terrain, and using in fashioning and fathoming equipment very well. Like one time I had spilled some oil on my the parking lot where my family lives, and there was a beautiful girl next door that I referenced a couple of times, and I got to spend some time around her and some of her guy friends as she was moving out. And one of her guy friends, he didn't come out and say it, but he knew that I was in trouble with the landlord because some oil had spilled from my mother's vehicle and it stayed in the parking lot like that. So as I was helping his lady friend to move, I was glad to help them, because when someone's that beautiful, a beautiful lady, you're glad, if you're honest, you're glad to help a beautiful lady. It is your honor to help. It is your honor and duty through honor. If it is really honor and have been love, it is your duty. You would feel blessed to help someone. What would you not do for someone that was really beautiful to you, that was lovely to you? What would you not do for them? So I was compelled to help this woman move because I really liked her. But her friend, he liked me. He respected me enough that I actually genuinely liked this person. Like if you really love someone, if you really truly love someone, you're not messed up by people that actually like that person. Because if someone like, say, I don't know what it's like to have children, but if someone really does, like say you have a child, and you're on a bus somewhere, and an old man, he showed attention to your child, like he really actually, like he showed just simple love and kindness to your child. That would be beautiful, I would imagine, to a parent, that this person actually really genuinely intrinsically values who is you, the best of you, that person did. But if you love someone and someone actually really respects that person, not out of lust, not out of not out of lust or passion, but they intrinsically value this person that you love, that is also you, you would have a little bit of camaraderie and respect for them if you're really sturdy like that. So when he was about to, when I was helping this lady move out, and some of her guy friends that were in her life, he knew that I was down bad with my landlord because I had a oil stain, and I on the parking lot, and I didn't know how to do about that. I had went and got some of these products like that you pour on it, but it didn't work. So the fool went and got a damn water blaster out of somewhere that he had worked at once. He had an inroad with somewhere that he had worked at, and he went and borrowed their damn water blaster like that, and he had it to the side. And as I was helping them move some furniture, and his lady friend was like, "Damn, you're kind of strong," because I was being like a big stature, and sometimes you have gifts that you didn't know how you have been given gifts for a purpose in this life. You may have been born strong enough so you could help a lady move something down the stairs, no more, no less. So he appreciated that I did that. He was like, "Oh yeah, check this out too." And he pulled out a damn water blaster, blast that oil stain right off the damn concrete, as it would have otherwise been impossible, and had me in permanent smoke with the landlord because I wouldn't know how to do it that. So a lot of people of a European background, they can be very sturdy around like just fashioning. So I'm not saying that anybody couldn't have thought of that or wouldn't have, but I noticed that a lot of people of a European background, they're sturdy around like outdoors and surviving. So you can imagine that it would have been a real reciprocity and match made in heaven before life, some of the best of which, the reciprocity between Native American people and European people, because both of them, they had to sustain very harsh winters. And also you can imagine that the understanding of the American, the indigenous native to America, and then the ruggedness and the intrepidness and the ingenuity of European settlers, both the Vikings and the latter settlers, it would have been a real reciprocity, and real actual, the means what would be one of the greatest nations, could be the greatest expressions of freedom, could be partly through the collaboration of the native indigenous to Americas and the European. Then you have the African influence. There's been no continent that didn't have the presence of what we appreciate as African people, I think, and that likely was the case in the Americas prior to the coming of Columbus. I have, it's been said by people like Tashreeq Bey that you had soon had people that would resemble and be connected to what you call Africa, Asia Minor, during that time and prior to colonialism and hereafter. So some people say that if you imagine, I heard someone say that if you imagine how difficult it is to have, like, so the Titanic sunk, right? If you imagine how much of logistics is involved in getting 10,000 people together on a ocean liner, a cruiser, where they're giving you all that they have, they're giving you this much of resources. Everyone come on there, got this much resources that they're handing off to you, and all they ask is for a good time on a boat. And you have that much difficulty with 10,000, but you also got this many million people across the Atlantic, and they didn't. I'm not saying, I don't mean to be egregious with that, but all those people that got aboard about the Atlantic, whatever it would cost to shelter and house and get people across the Atlantic, as they're able to survive that, as heinous as those conditions, they also wouldn't have had the means in your terms of your society to pay for that. So you were able to afford paying for this many people to get over here and actually have that feasible for even the ones that just survive. You got that many people over here on a boat, that millions of people. I'm not saying that wasn't really history or that didn't happen, but just that it probably couldn't have happened the way we imagine, or it was an incredible feat. So just to actually get a million, 3 million people across the ocean of the Atlantic on a boat before modern technology like that. That's in profound if that happened the case. But according to Tashreeq Bey, that hadn't likely only been the case. There had also been American Africans here. So you take the brilliance of the African people, the American African people, the European settlers, and the native indigenous to Americas, and you have the recipe for rock and roll, real actual rock and roll, as we had folk music to the gospel to rock and roll like that, as we had the standpoint to do that, the resources to do that, the understanding of the land to do that, the Constitution to do that. That's how you would have had that. So I'm just saying that it's not all bad. The history between the European settlers and the indigenous to the Americas, because we're people and there's a good and bad to all things. But I guess the best that it had been done, according to my understanding, was the Vikings. They were sturdy, and they had stronger relationships, more reciprocity with the native indigenous, I think, from the testimony of this actual Viking member that I met. But then also, like, when people appropriate things, right? Like, so, like, people, they try to imitate like the Native Americans. Like, each region of the earth, they have understanding and traditions there, and then they also have herbs and like plants that are there that help people cope with life and survive life and be healthy, that they would know how to use appropriately there, right? That they also didn't have a that they weren't profiteering, but they used it gently, as sustainably, uh, with understanding. One would be tobacco. So, like, in the United States, right, we're all messed up. People are intimidated about tobacco, right? Tobacco had been the devil, right? We better watch out for tobacco, right? Don't tell, don't nothing about tobacco, right? But these people were existing with tobacco for this many iterations of eons of living beyond recorded history. They had been okay with back tobacco. They were sturdy enough to use. They were mature enough to use tobacco. The Native Americans, right? But also the Native Americans, the indigenous to the Americas, they didn't have the same incentives of profiting, hoarding, gleaning. They didn't glean and cull the bison, the buffalo, which were also them. The people are not different than their food supply. So when they massacred the buffalo, they had massacred the people directly and indirectly. Part of the atrocities of that, was it genocide or not, what they did to the buffalo and what that amounted to the people was blatant genocide. Whatever the incentive of that, to strip the food source, but also the people who are the food, because you are what you eat. So the people had been actually the buffalo. Now one's a buffalo. Now one's a person. Now one's the earth. Now one's a buffalo. Now one's a person, like that. And there hadn't been a problem like that, as we're respecting one another and one another who is one another, and the buffalo who's giving themselves to ourselves, which is ourselves, as we're respectful and we're not wasteful in that, but we're also not hoarding, we're not profiteering, and we're not isolating and we're not we're not concentrating advantage, because when we do advantage, that's not actually living, that's actually war, because war for intensive purposes is advantage. So all's fair in love and war, and love and war and economics is, as we have it, is advantage. So when you glean things, when you cull things, when you concentrate things to an objective of profit that is advantage, now you're out of reciprocity, you're out of harmony. And then when you mass produce something, you almost guarantee and inevitably you bastardize something, and you pollute something and corrupt it when you mass produce it, because you're not in equity with the real yield of a harvest, of a season, of what an environment can bear, what a plant can bear, sustain of itself, what a plant can give to you of itself without giving up its roots to that it can't produce itself anymore. But also then when you're incentivized to get that off, and to sell all of that before it go bad like that, you press it off on people. So it's not curated as well when it's mass done like that. I asked Tajri Bey himself. I asked him, is wine good to go? Is wine healthy for you? He said, yeah, if you make it. Because if you ain't making it, it's mass produced and it ain't all the way good to go. Even your high end stuff, as long as it's mass produced, or it's produced in such a way as to be sold by a certain time to keep up with different quotas and different like calendars of business and stuff like that, that corrupts it right there. So it ain't good to go. It ain't with love. It ain't with understanding. If it's like that, it's not. It's not, because anything you would eat in life, right? So I go in life, and sometimes I actually like I put things in my hair, like I put like feathers in my hair when I find them. You can find them a lot in downtown St. Paul. Like somebody's out there knocking over birds. I don't mean to be egregious with that, but a lot of birds, a lot of feathers will present themselves to anyone who would be looking for a feather in downtown St. Paul. But your real bounties in life, like your real experiences, your real partners, your real meals, your real opportunities, they present themselves to you. And if you go looking for them and plucking for them outside of harmony, or outside of like what you would do organically, you're going out your way to bother something, to pluck something against its time, before its time, after its time, when it's not ready, when you're not ready. Now you're that's something different. So the real amenities in nature, they present themselves to you, and if you have enough understanding, you know what to do with them if and when they shall present themselves to you like that. But when you could say that something of the modern reality, like the actual like some of what we have for like horticulture and farming, I'm not saying it's good or bad, because all things have a good or bad, but that you would arbitrarily seek to have that you would form fit and preconceive, pre 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 pre-plan, presuppose, pre-allocate a crop, a yield, before it actually had a chance to exist and to make up its mind and to be cared for and to be slighted and to suffer bounty and deprivation of the actual real cycles of weather and activity upon the earth in an arbitrary way that is a preconceived way. That's already a little bit outside of harmony. And then you could say that some of the surplus that you would get from that, what that affords you in terms of livelihood and even to some degree progeny, if I'm being honest, that could put you outside of the real balances of nature, such as that some of our incessant conflict, it might have to do with that we had got outside the balances when we started fronting and hoarding surplus, different than the real yields, because a real farmer doesn't glean the entire crop. You leave something of the actual crop so that it can refertilize itself. So you actually don't strip the fertilizer. So you don't strip the soil of its essence by robbing of its essence by gleaning it. That is. So when you would have like, I think that back in the day, like feudalism, this and that. What does feudalism mean? Feudalism mean is that you work for subsistence. You work for nothing. You work for nothing off the strength of the dignity of someone of higher nobility like that. That's feudalism. But then after you curate and you retrieve the surplus, the yield, the harvest, what would remain in the field, you as a serf may partake of some of what remains. That is the scraps of what remains, as you may survive off some of the scraps. That might be a problem in itself too, because actually probably nobody should have been taking the scraps. You should have actually been sharing whatever the actual harvest is equitably, as you can do so with class, because human beings will form a class structure. Try as you may form a commune, you may form a new civilization of civilization may be oxymoronic, because as soon as you become civilized, you're arbitrary at that point, and you're violent and blundering at that point, and you're no longer civil. But you may start form a new living accommodation on another planet with the greatest members. So if we were going to outer space, who would we take with us? I had someone actually ask me that and mean it. Who would we take with us if we're leaving this place? Um, when you would do so, you would still have a class structure. People are going to form class structure, try as you may, I think, until we get to some another form of enlightenment. But it won't get there until we somehow dispense with what the class we already have that's reinforcing itself. But so you wouldn't have class, but you would have had to form a way to equitably share the real harvest among whatever class structure you had next to up to without having to glean the actual scraps. When you start to glean the scraps, then you compromise the land's ability to replenish itself. That might have actually been why they were down bad and having to flee Europe, is because I'm making this shit up as I go, man. You can't make this shit up how I make this shit up as I go. But they were in a lot of trouble in Europe because they were not sharing equitably somehow, and they're in trouble. But also, you could say that maybe there were different famines, right? We have famine in Europe. I'm not saying that was only because of, but it might have actually had to do with how they're treating one another. The disease might have had to do with how they're treating each other, and they were also limiting things, right? You can't say the Earth is round. You can't say anything different than the books say. Therefore, you can't do anything original. Like think of a cooler way to do things like sewage and this and that. Even like medicine, like this and that. It's interesting when people actually got to experiment to actually learn medicine because science had been deprived by the church largely. So you could say medicine would have been deprived, such that you would have more disease and poverty in Europe going back. But then also, as I understand, they were just letting the serfs eat whatever scraps were left after the harvest. That may have been the undoing of the fields, then the harvest, then the economics, then the relationships, then the class, then the religion, then the freedom, then the autonomy, then they had to get out of somewhere like that. Um, but so um but like with the tobacco is that, so tobacco is tobacco, but when you're Bible, so I don't know actually how the Native Americans would have curated and experienced tobacco, but I can imagine that it wouldn't have been commercial. It wouldn't have had some of the negative properties that it has now, at least as a function of mass production with the profit incentive. And it just wouldn't have been like the same thing as like a pack a day, like sitting outside break like that, like that. I don't think they would have been doing it like that. Like sometimes you don't know what you're doing, right? Like so it's like, okay, so why do you do anything, right? You do it for the effect, right? You do something for the people in when people take things that haven't belonged to them, or that they appropriate things without honoring the people they took it from, you might use that stuff wrong, right? So you're using tobacco for the effect, but you don't want the tobacco of an effect, and you call yourself a grown up, and you're thinking like that. So you're grown up enough to partake of tobacco. You're grown up enough to partake, yet your thought process is you would like to partake so that you can experience the effect of partaking without experiencing the effect of partaking, like that. So what I'm saying is that you think that when you take tobacco, like you take a hit of tobacco, right? And then you leave it alone, right? And then you're having withdrawals, right? It's making you want tobacco, right? Your body feels different, right? You feel like that, right? You think that had been bad, but the reason it's bad is because you know no better. You have no more presence of mind. You're so. I don't think that tobacco goes with clocks. I don't think that tobacco is made for clocks. And I don't think that tobacco is made for people that were reared under clocks, around clocks. I don't think so. So, like, for example, right, you take the experience of the native people in the United States, and some of their experience within boarding schools was horrible. We know that, right? I'm not the first one to say that, right? I'm not wrong to say that native indigenous people to the Americas had horrible experiences in boarding schools, right? Whatever they would have been having horrible experiences around in boarding schools, I bet that 50 to 90% of any altercation that took place in any boarding school of any time in the Americas had to do with the clock. How come you weren't here on time? Hurry up and do that. Do that. Do that before the clock. Do that. Hey, y'all can't go until the clock. We don't get out of here until the clock does that. Why are you out here? The clock didn't say that. So the purpose of school is to is to is to train you for clocks. That is for first forced servitude, um, uh, um, uh, animal husbandry, as is dictated by a clock. As human beings understand themselves to be able to understand a clock, that's school. So the real experience of school, I've said in other videos, is the last second of the last day of 12th grade. You think that's the best part of your life. That's actually the ceiling of your fate because now you're all the way trained. You have no understanding of yourself as a free member of society, as a free agent of society that is privileged and entitled to the livelihood that comes with the dignity of a high school education without the last second of the last day of the last school of 12th grade like that. So that's the completion of your training because you know yourself as no better than and no more growner than what you came through or what's possible for you having come through high school as it's respected by the broader society that will afford you the means of access to opportunities that are your livelihood, such that that last second was your real training right there. You went through this much. Sometimes you don't know the real getting over on getting over. You know you're someone getting over, but you don't know what had got over after getting. So your whole experience of school was to make you think that you had been actually at school and that you had been doing something constructive other than to get up to the last second of the last day and think that your freedom, your viability, your life revolves around that last second of the last day that it had given you freedom. No, it took your freedom by giving you. So the way you take something isn't actually by stripping something, it's by giving something. Just like I said in another video, you would kill somebody with a cupcake. If you want to kill somebody, people, get them out of somewhere that's valuable that you don't want to be there so you can access that. You could get it done in an apartment building with a cupcake, or you could get it tired with an entire people, with an entire country, with an entire hemisphere, with the entire globe by no more than an hourglass. The last drop of sand in the hour. This is a higher tier of education. We do not use clocks, for they are not quite as exact as the ancient sands. We have the granule of sand. When this glass tips over, the last sand, the last iota of sand will fall, synonymous with the striking of the best curated clock from the finest craftsmen in clockmanship. That last second is yours now. You are given your freedom now with the clock now, but you also know yourself as no stronger than and different outside of the implications of a clock in the modern iteration. Digital this and that is no more sophisticated than the industrial period because they're all exactly still trained to wage slavery upon a clock. But if you're trained in these schools like that, around clocks like that, you are limited by your understanding of time, such as your mind is limited, such as that you don't have enough presence of mind to enjoy the sensation of what tobacco is doing to you because you think that, oh, I gotta be here, oh, I gotta get back to work, oh, I gotta wake up for this, oh, I gotta do that. I'm not a free person. Tobacco is a blessing to free people, the indigenous people of any land that is free of coercion and delusion, that is fiat. Any any person, any free person that is not limited by false notions may experience presence of mind, which is themselves. Tobacco helps the sensation of presence of mind and to feel one's body. So the calling of tobacco, the pull of tobacco, the compellingness of tobacco is not compelling you to hit another one like that because you're already experiencing the effect. So it's kind of like some people, right? It's like, imagine like some people right, like you like a lot of like cool stuff. You like to watch stuff at night that you're not proud of, right? But you might actually be scared of a pat on the back, right? Like are you actually comfortable enough with yourself to give someone a hug? Like, because a lot of people don't know how to hug people. I watched a real video about how to hug people, right? If you're a man, when you hug a woman, you're supposed to put your arm on her lower back. If she's comfortable with her enough, if she's comfortable with herself enough, if her family, if her loved one is comfortable with her being comfortable with herself enough to come into your presence as a man, close enough to give you a hug, you shall hold her by the small of her back, and you embrace her essence like that. It's closer than a kiss. It's better than a hug is actually deeper than a kiss when it's a real hug between people. Like sometimes I'll go to these services at church, and the like it's interesting like how people adapt each other in certain settings like a church, right? So you're in a church, you give someone a formal handshake, you give someone a light handshake like a prayer. The Bible says a gentle word breaks a bone. I think that a gentle handshake is a deeper handshake because there's nothing fake about it. You don't need to fake what's real. It's where two or three touch and agree, it shall be acted, it shall be enacted if it is in the purposes of this life. So all you don't have to do more than touch someone's hand in sincerity, and that's the deepest form of dap like that. Sometimes I've seen in the Middle East, they put each other's hand on each other's heart like that, and they mean it. And then I saw that they try to a little bit appropriate that in the film Avatar, and they're bogus for that because you can't do that, baby, if you're not from that, baby. Even if you're Hollywood, baby. Even if you're trying to pay homage to it, baby. If that hadn't been you, baby, that hadn't been you, baby. So you can't do that one like that. No, not you. Not even the greatest director. Not even the greatest film. Not even the winningest film. Not even the Oscar, this and that. You can't put your hand on someone's heart in any studio, in any green room, in any backdrop, and have that go over and be as believable as real people, part of a lifestyle that would mean that and come from that and still stand by that and still die by that. You can't do that, Mr. Hollywood. You can't do that, Mr. Actor. You can't do that, anyone. You cannot do that. So you can't dap someone how you can't dap someone. No one can. But you don't have to dap someone how you don't dap someone because that's not you. You can dap them like you dap them. So some people they might do a sturdy handshake. This Viking brother, he told me how to do a Viking handshake. And that's not, I wasn't actually comfortable doing a Viking handshake because it's a little bit more, it's more manly than I am. I'm a man. I'm not less of a man, but I'm not that kind of a man. I'm not the kind of man to throw up loggers like that and bump loggers like that and good to go like that, like sturdy like that. Because I've always had like gentle hands. Like I would play basketball like sometimes like in the Southwest when it was really cold out, but my hands became really cold. And like some people would touch my hands and they always think my hands were like kind of great, like very. I have like somewhat of like feminine hands, and the only people ever appreciated that was my mother, who thought it'd be good for a piano, and my guitar teacher really liked that in me, my hands like that. He thought it'd be good for guitar because we had been born to do certain things, baby. Rock and roll, baby. I was born to do this. I have been born to do this. The rock and roll like that. I like the fingers like that. I have been born so. I have been born so. I tell you so. I have been born so. I wouldn't lie to you now. Had been born so. Had shown me. Had been my hand the whole time like that. My hand like that. My mama had hold my hand. Had made my hand, and she liked my hand too around the piano. Had been straight like that. And my guitar teacher, the real rock and roll, I had tried to pick up the guitar but hadn't gotten nowhere till I had learned the real rock and roll. Had like my hand like that, baby. Had said a little bit feminine like that, but it's the real rock and roll. I told you so. I wouldn't lie to you now. That's me now. But so that's just me. And then this brother, that same Viking brother that showed me the Viking handshake, he had a mood cube, and he let me that cube. It'll respond to your vitality, the warmth of your hand, that is, and to a certain pitch of color. And if you put my finger on that vitality cube, it actually doesn't register. Part of that is because I had a lot of experiences last year playing. I'll play music outside, and I'll have like these gloves that are like that expose the fingertips, so your hands protected from the wind, but you can still access the instrument. But then also I had experiences on motorcycle where my hands got very cold, so I had a little bit less of feeling. This last year I had less of feeling around my hands since I started messing with motorcycles. And it can make it sometimes difficult for a guitar, but my hands still work, baby, because it's still been the rock and roll, baby. But so I'm not familiar with like them sturdy handshakes like them Vikings do like that. He showed me. But then like some people will actually hug each other. So sometimes grown men like at church will hug each other. I would hug people at church, these grown men, because it's saying that this is real love, and I'm not afraid to hug another man if it's real love. Because if it's real love, it's not gay. It's not less than gay. It's not more than gay. It's not different than gay, but it can be anything. And it's love. Love is not limited by anything. It is not baffled by anything. It does not bat an eye at anything. Not even gayness. Not even straightness. Not even manhood. Not even womanhood. Not even childhood. Not even war. Not even suffering. Not even dying. Not even lovemaking. Love ain't messed up about none of that. So if it had been real love, you can as soon hug anyone about anything, and it still had been love if it were really love. But the real actual way to hug someone like a woman is you hold the small of her back and you pull her in and you experience her essence one the other. You two like that. That's a real hug like that. And so I a little bit diverged with that. But yeah, but so with the tobacco is that I think that when you're taking pulls of tobacco like that all the time, right? So, but some people they're actually not they're not confident enough to experience intimacy as much as they like pictures of this and that, and they may be aroused by this. Some people aren't actually familiar with intimacy. That's also like in socializing. Like some people they can't be themselves and banter around people because they're not actually comfortable with that degree of engagement or openness or vulnerability or vitality. Also, vitality. Some people are afraid of their own vitality because it takes effort to be vital, right? It takes effort to run. It takes effort to work out. It takes effort to be cool. It takes effort to be sex like that. But so you're used to you're comfortable with not exerting effort, If you were to experience vitality, that may command or imply more effort in life. So you're comfortable with your range, and you're also a little bit daunted by vitality, if you're honest. So some people would be intimidated by a hug, such that you want to experience things, you want to experience intimacy, you want to experience people, but you're actually intimidated by experiencing people. But then also you want to experience tobacco. You take the tobacco, you start to get the experience of tobacco. In nature, there's no such thing as withdrawal. That's an arbitrary a man-made coined term like that. Nature is nature. Your body is nature, and nature is nature. You take tobacco. Tobacco is tobacco. You are you. Tobacco is to you what tobacco is to you, including what you're calling withdrawals. But what do you do when you start to actually experience the real sensation of tobacco, the real enjoyment and purposes and blessing of tobacco? You take yet another hit of it because you're actually afraid to experience what you would like to experience. So rather than experience it and go the way out through it, which also takes effort and presence of mind and humility and deprivation, deprecation, suffering, that is actually the enjoyment, the acquired taste of tobacco like that. You take you another hit and you go up, 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 and now you don't took. So you've been smoking this many years, and you took this many hits, but you never actually wrote out one hit for a week, for a month, let it see what it do to you like that. You had took a million hits. Yeah, a million hits of anything will mess somebody up like that. But what you do after a million hits, take another million, one hit. So yeah, that shit had been wicked like that. Not only is it wicked because you mass produced it, you commercialized it, you had a profit incentive, you probably curated and sold it in and out of season, but especially out of season, as it's profitable and not, as it's expedient and not, you consume it from that standpoint, from that premise, without homage to anything, to the real traditions, the real purposes, the real people, the real understanding. You make no bones about that. You apologize about that. You humble yourself for none of that, and then you go puffing on their stuff that you don't know how to, that you appropriated, that you ain't sturdy around, because you also have a different training from a different reality and paradigm that ain't what had been the paradigm where the tobacco is endemic to, and that they can enjoy it with, and that it's a service with. So you did yourself a disservice after you did them a disservice, and it's shit bad like that. But tobacco ain't bad like that. But